This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. Today we've got another great video for you. The title of the story is I Discovered My Soon-to-Be Fiancé Was in an FWB Relationship for 8 years. Yes, that's correct. 8 years. How would you like to find out something like that as you were getting ready to pop the question to your girlfriend? Well, this is a great story, so sit back, relax. It's one you're going to have to pay attention to, though, because there's a lot of twists and turns, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's get into it. Now, before we start the story, I wanted to give you my opinion on FWB relationships. These relationships, as all of you know, are pure lust. And as I said in my last video, lust is 100 times stronger than love. It's a very active emotion. And as such, an FWB partner is the best possible partner you can have for casual intimacy and fun. However, they normally flame out pretty quickly oftentimes over time. On the flip side, and this is just my opinion, other men out there may have a totally different opinion, never get into a committed relationship with a woman who has been in an FWB relationship with another man, as there's a very high risk she will revisit that relationship at some point in the future. Because again, I go back to the relationship is totally built on lust. So if you're in a relationship with her and things start to get mundane and boring and blasé, or something is starting to go haywire in your relationship, she's going to think back to those times in her life when there was passion and think about that FWB. So that's my opinion. You may have a different opinion, but let's get into the story and we'll talk more about it as we go. The original post, as you can see, is from June 29th of 2021. The poster says, I never imagined I would be posting on an online forum soliciting feedback from strangers, but here I am. This situation recently surfaced between my girlfriend Cathy, age 26, and I, Curt, age 28. Cathy and I have been dating exclusively for 22 months, and I am deeply in love with her. Things between us have been nothing short of wonderful, and I recently started contemplating proposing, as I can't imagine being with anyone else. About 4 months into our relationship, we had the talk about our past partners. At that time, Cathy was 24 and I was 26. For context. Now when he's saying 24 and 26, he's saying that's how old they were back then. I went first as I didn't want Cathy to feel pressured or embarrassed, and told her that I had been with a total of 7 women, all of whom I dated for some period of time. I've never been into casual relationships, so each of my encounters were with women I had dated at least 6 months, with the longest relationship being just over 2 years. My first time was at age 18 with my high school girlfriend. Now it's Cathy's turn. She told me, you're not going to believe me, but I've only been with 2 other men. Well, Cathy, we're not going to believe you because later in the story, we're going to find out that's not true. She says, he says, she claimed that like me, her first time was at age 18 with her high school crush. He was a multi-sport athlete and a very religious person. She dated him from her senior year through the start of her sophomore year in college. He wanted to wait until marriage to have relations, but she explained that one night after drinking too much at a party, you know what's going to happen here, they ended up doing the deed in her dorm room. She said instead of the intimacy bringing them closer, it actually drove them apart as her boyfriend felt he had committed a terrible sin and made her feel guilty and ashamed as well. Cathy claimed they dated for another 5 months after that and were intimate another 5 to 6 times. but each time he blamed her for enticing him to commit sin. Boy, he sounds like a real winner, doesn't he? For religious reasons, he refused to wear protection and forbid her from using protection, and she was very fearful of getting pregnant. As their relationship progressed, he had become verbally abusive and made her cry constantly. Her grades suffered and she was very depressed. Things were so bad she contemplated dropping out of school. Instead, she confided in her parents and they insisted she break up with him, which she begrudgingly did. This was potentially a life-saving move on her part, as her ex was arrested and charged with physically assaulting another woman at the college the following year. According to Cathy, his defense was that he was using steroids, which caused his erratic behavior. After the incident, he dropped out of school and moved to Texas to get away from his past. Cathy said her second relationship was with a guy she had been friends with at college. She described him as being super nice, which means, AKA, he's a nice guy, and you never want to be that nice guy dating a woman. But she said she never saw him as a romantic partner, though he desperately wanted to be her boyfriend. They started dating a few months after her breakup with her first boyfriend, and he emotionally helped her cope. She said they enjoyed going out to eat, to movies, etc. But for her, there was no romantic spark. So this poor guy is spending all his money trying to impress her, and she doesn't want any part of him from that perspective, from the romantic perspective. She's just interested in having a friend and someone to dump all of her emotions on. Cathy wanted to keep their relationship as just friends, but he continued to pursue her. She said after 6 months of dating, their relationship started to become more romantic as they were spending so much time together, and one night they just did it. She said their affair lasted less than a month and they returned to being just friends, but things were never the same after that and they grew distant. Cathy wished they'd never gotten intimate, as doing so ended their friendship. So the nice guy pretty much got a little taste of it, but then he got the boot pretty quickly. Cathy claimed to have not dated anyone for nearly 2 years until she met me. Now keep that in mind as we go through this story, what she says right there. I never dated anybody else after I broke up with the nice guy until I got with you, which was like a period of 2 years. And he says the rest, as they say, is history, our history. Now keep in mind the talk that those two had happened 18 months ago. And we've been operating with this understanding since then. I've been under the impression that I had found an actual unicorn, a traditional woman with conservative values who'd only been with 2 men. Wow, that does sound like a unicorn in today's day and age, doesn't it? I thought I was one of the rare guys who had hit the love lottery. Well, everything changed last Thursday. So let's find out what happened last Thursday. My lifelong best friend, we'll call him Tim, called me and said he had something important to tell me. Now, when I first read this story, I thought, oh no, don't tell me that Tim got with your girlfriend. And that's not the case, as we're going to hear now. He says we met at a local bar after work, and he proceeded to tell me news that turned my world upside down. As background, Tim didn't go to college and instead went straight to work at a distribution warehouse. He's been there over 8 years and is a senior supervisor. Unlike me and my other friends, Tim has a house with equity, a nice bank account, and a 401k, while we all have thousands in student debt. So Tim sounds like he's a pretty level-headed, smart guy from that perspective. Tim told me that he works with a great guy named Perry. Now enter the picture now, this Perry. And a lot of this story going forward is going to be centered around this Perry's life. So really pay attention here. He says, who I've heard Tim speak about before. Perry started working at the warehouse about 18 months ago, working for Tim, and recently got promoted to supervisor. Tim was very proud of this since he hired Perry, trained him, and was instrumental in getting him promoted. He described Perry as being an honest, hardworking, and all-around great guy. and they've become friends since he got promoted and is no longer his subordinate. Now, here's where my perfect snow globe relationship and future wedding plans get smashed to pieces, he says. Tim said on Tuesday evening he and Perry met after work to grab a drink and were casually discussing what they did over the weekend. Tim told Perry he and his girlfriend spent the weekend with me and my girlfriend Cathy, camping at a nearby state park. Somewhere in the conversation, Perry asked Tim what Cathy's last name was, as Tim had earlier told him the town where Cathy and I lived. And he says here in parentheses, we don't live together. So what this poster Curt is saying is he and his girlfriend Cathy live apart, which is probably a very smart thing we're going to find out as we go through this story. When Tim told Perry Cathy's last name, he said Perry froze, then turned and looked away. Tim asked Perry if he knew Cathy, and Perry said, yes, I know her better than anybody. Tim asked Perry how he knew her, and Perry proceeded to spill his guts about their relationship. So he's going to tell this Tim all about their history. Now pay attention here, folks. Perry explained that he was born on the wrong side of the tracks, and his parents were drug abusers, both of whom passed away at a young age. He was raised by his widowed maternal grandma, who lived in a trailer court just down the street from Cathy's aunt. Perry said he and Cathy were friends since they were 5 years old. He said they played together whenever she visited her aunt and stayed close friends all through their school years, even though they lived in different towns and attended different schools. Perry said things progressed as they got older, and when they were 16, they had their first intimate encounter at her aunt's house. It was the first time for both of them. From there, they carried on their love affair undercover nearly 18 months until one day Cathy came to him and told him she found someone new and they would need to break up, but could still be friends. Perry said he was crushed and never felt so bad in his life. He tried everything to get Cathy to change her mind, but she told him her new guy was on her level. Can you imagine saying that? Ugh. And her parents approved of him. According to Perry, Cathy told him she would never forget him and that he would always be her first love and very special to her. She explained while she loved him, breaking up was necessary as things would never work between them because of their social differences. After the breakup, Perry became depressed and started drinking to drown the pain. Prior to this, he claims to have never touched alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs and was a B student. He became so depressed he really didn't want to go on, but said the good Lord intervened and gave him the strength to move forward. Perry said he really didn't formally date anyone else in high school after that, but instead started having casual encounters with not so nice women. He did so to try to forget her, meaning this Cathy, and the pain she caused, but instead it just deepened his depression and his life was spiraling. His grades plummeted and he managed to do just enough to qualify for his high school diploma and graduate. So he went from a B student, then after he, had relations with this Cathy and she broke up with him, then he ends up just squeaking by, probably a D student, just to get through, to graduate. After graduating, Perry told Tim he threw himself into working construction, building houses, where he learned how to do everything from plumbing to electrical. After a year of working, things were finally going great for him. He bought and remodeled a home on a piece of land just outside of town where he grew up and moved his grandma and her trailer to his property, where she lived with him until she passed away from cancer. So this poor guy lost his parents. He lost the love of his life, his girlfriend, and now lost his grandma to cancer. So this guy's had a really, really tough life. Then one day, Cathy showed up at his door and wreaked havoc on his life again. She had just broken up with her steroidal athlete boyfriend, he says, and came to visit Perry after learning of his grandma's passing. They quickly reignited their affair, and they picked up where they left off. Perry said during this time, Cathy would drive home from college every Friday and spend several hours on Friday evening with him, and then again Sunday evening when she was supposed to be driving back to college. She did this to once again keep their affair a secret from her parents. So even though she's an adult now and she's graduated and in college, she's still keeping their affair, their love affair, on the down low. Perry said while he was hurt about this, he accepted the arrangement because he loved Cathy so much. He now realizes she was just using him. Cathy then abruptly broke it off with him again after 4 months, saying she met someone at college. Perry again was crushed, but he muscled through. Then, after just a couple of weeks, Cathy came back and said she made a big mistake and wanted to get back together with him. This time, Perry said he had a long talk with Cathy about their relationship and where it was going. Now, I want you to listen to what she tells him here. He told her he loved her and would do anything for her. Cathy then told him that what they had was a friends with benefits relationship. She explained she sees them as two lifelong friends that love each other and express that love through having S. Perry then claimed Cathy told him the connection they have is everlasting, and there's no reason they couldn't maintain their friends with benefits arrangement forever, even if they were in relationships with other people. So what she's, putting in his noodle here is, hey, I want to keep you as my side piece, and there's no reason why we can't keep hooking up like this forever and just keep this on the hush hush. Ugh, that is disgusting. Perry told Tim he didn't like the setup, but he was so in love with her at the time he'd do anything to keep her. For the next 2+ years, they spent 3 to 5 nights a week at his house. She was driving 15 miles to get there after work and anytime she could sneak off. He said she was physically obsessed with him and he was with her. Throughout this entire time, they kept their affair a secret, and Cathy told him the secretive nature of their relationship really turned her on. He said they never went out in public or met at her place, just hours of S. So what he's saying here is they never went out anywhere. They just stayed in his house and you know what. Perry said his goal during this time was to get Cathy to fall in love and marry him, but that never happened. Instead, she met me, and he says here, remember me, Curt? Because he was talking so much about this Perry, he says, remember me, Curt? And once again, dropped Perry like a dirty tissue. Perry said when she broke it off with him, he told her when she leaves this time, it's for good, as the on and off again affair was effing up his head. She rationed that while she had a new boyfriend, they could continue their FWB. He refused the offer. The final breakup was very emotional for Perry, but he muscled through it as he realized what a toxic person she was. Perry told Tim Cathy came to his home on multiple occasions during the first few months of our relationship and tried to initiate intimacy, but each time he declined her advances and sent her away. So after she, left this Perry and went with this Curt, the original poster here, the guy telling the story or posting the story, she was still going back and trying to hook up with Perry, to reestablish their FWB relationship. What a piece of work. All total, Perry told Tim he and Cathy were intimate well over 1,000 times, and their physical chemistry was pure magic. He then went on to say she was the most toxic thing in his life and wished he'd never met her. Since their breakup, Perry has cut off all contact with Cathy. He's been in a committed relationship with a woman for over a year now and recently got engaged. Perry told Tim for the first time in his life he feels truly happy and at peace. Well, good for him, because that guy has had a pretty difficult life up to that point. Tim told Perry since he told him all of this information about Cathy, he would now need to tell me, as I'm his best friend. Perry said he'd prefer Tim not tell me, as he didn't want to cause trouble, but eventually he agreed, saying he would do the same thing for a good friend. And the poster here, this Curt, says, "Ouch! Hearing all of this was like getting punched in the gut by Mike Tyson. I felt sick." I then questioned Tim and asked, "How do you know Perry's not lying?" Tim said he has emails and pictures of them throughout the years, as well as handwritten love letters from Cathy that he's willing to show you if necessary. Now the poster says, "I have been nauseous and totally mind-effed since hearing all this yesterday. I could barely get to sleep last night and have thought about it all day at work. I'm home alone this evening as Cathy is out at a women's club banquet with her mom. Cathy and I have plans to spend the weekend together, and I'm torn about what to do." What do you mean you're torn about what to do? You know what you have to do, mister. "So I spent the last 2 hours typing up this post, hoping to get some unbiased opinions from the audience here." Now, here's the questions that he has. He says, question, "Do I ignore this information since it happened before we met?" And I'm going to answer for you, Curt. No, you don't ignore this information. This is very important information that you have to act upon, because your whole life is on the line here. Or he says, "Do I confront her and ask her to explain her relationship with Perry, then based on her response, decide my next steps?" Yes, that's what you do. And he knows, I'm sure deep down, he knows what he needs to do and what he has to do, but he just wanted to get that confirmation from the audience or the community. He says, on one hand, I don't want to damage our relationship, but on the other, she lied about her past. Her relationship with Perry was more than just a casual fling. It was a full-blown Romeo and Juliet love affair. Also, the way she treated him is cruel, and I'd have a hard time trusting a person like that. He says, help! So now we're getting ready to get to his first update. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this video, please hit that like button, because when you do that, it moves this video up on the YouTube algorithm and gets it seen by more people across the world. So now let's get to that first update. First update. Now this was on July 3rd, so a few days after his first update, or his first post. He says, "Thank you to everyone who responded. Wow, I didn't expect to get so many replies. The overwhelming consensus is that I should confront Cathy and let her tell me about her relationship with Perry." The count was something like 113 responses to 2, with the 2 being from women who had done something similar to Cathy. That doesn't surprise me. They felt I should forgive and forget, since this was all in the past. I disagree, but I appreciate the heartfelt responses. So early this morning, I confronted Cathy, and let's just say it didn't go as I expected. She came to my house as we planned to go for a long walk along the river trail. When she got here, I sat her down and said I had something to ask her. I think she thought I was going to ask her to marry me, as she became nervous and flustered. I kind of felt bad and was going to delay the conversation, but I soldiered on. I just stated Perry's full name and said nothing. She sat there with a blank stare and said nothing, but I could tell the wheels were turning in her brain. I again said Perry's name and asked her to tell me about their relationship. She replied, "Who are you talking about?" I said, "You don't know Perry?" She said, "No, I know him, but why are you bringing him up to me? We've never discussed him before." I told her that someone who was very close to Perry told me about your relationship with him, and I want to hear your version of the story. Cathy said, "There's nothing to tell, really. We were friends when we were young, and that's it." I said, "That's all? You're sure about that?" She said nothing, but I could tell she was getting flustered. I asked Cathy to tell me the truth about their relationship, as I believe I have the whole truth, but wanted to hear it from her. Instead of answering, Cathy got up and bolted past me into the bathroom and locked the door. Now, this is the third or fourth story I've done where a woman, once she's been confronted with something, she bolts into the bathroom and locks the door. Unbelievable. He says, "I went over to the door and tried the handle and told her to come out and let's talk through this. She said nothing, so I just decided to give her time to compose herself. She stayed in there in the bathroom for over 20 minutes in silence. I got up and knocked on the door again, and she didn't say anything, so she didn't respond to him. I was concerned, and she was going to grab the tool to pop the lock when she opened the door and bolted past me out the front door to her car. So she's getting the heck out of Dodge. She's in good shape, but I've never seen her move so quickly," he says. "I ran behind her asking her to stay and talk, but she made it to her car and locked the door just before I could reach the handle. She started the car and drove away. To say I was completely gobsmacked is an understatement. I tried calling her multiple times, but she didn't answer. I also texted her several times telling her to come back and let's just talk, but she didn't respond. I then drove to her apartment, but she wasn't there. I sat in my car outside her apartment for about 30 minutes waiting to see if she'd come home, but she didn't. I just kept thinking to myself, what the heck just happened here? I need to talk to someone at this point, so I called Tim and told him what went down. He was as surprised as me by Cathy's reaction. Tim said, "You know what this means, don't you?" Instead of answering, I asked Tim, "What do you think it means?" He said, "I think it means everything Perry told me was the absolute truth, and Cathy is off somewhere formulating an explanation to give you." I told Tim, "I think you're absolutely right." He and I then went and met up for lunch, and he let me vent and get everything off my chest. I felt so much better after talking to him and regained some sense of clarity. While we were at the cafe, Cathy called me. She immediately apologized for leaving and said she wanted to meet with me to explain everything. We've arranged to meet back at my apartment this evening at 6:30 p.m. to talk. I'll come back on here tomorrow and update everyone on the outcome of our conversation. Thanks for listening to my relationship problems and for your moral support. So that was his first update. Now we're going to get to his second update. Here's his second update. This was from July 8th, so 5 days later. So he didn't come back the next day and update. He came back 5 days later. He says, "Sorry for the delay in responding. Things have been crazy for me, and with the holiday and all, I didn't get a chance to compose my thoughts on everything until this evening." Well, Cathy and I met on Saturday evening, and she started off by apologizing for running away. She said she was just so upset with herself that the only thing she could think to do was to flee the situation. Yeah, that's what you do. You just get out of there whenever you're, in a pickle. You just, let me get the hell out of here. Cathy proceeded to tell me that she and Perry were much more than just friends. She said he was her first true love, and that they kept their love a secret because of the socioeconomic status of Perry and his family. The poster says, "I never heard anyone use this term except for Wall Street analysts before, so I asked her how this applied to Perry and his family, as from what I understand, he is a good man." She acknowledged that he is a great person, but implied that her parents felt he was well below her, and because of their influence, she bought into this as well. I told her, that is all BS, right? She said she absolutely does, and she does not look down on anyone and feels we are all equal. But I could tell, this Curt says, I could tell, I could sense this was just something she said to appease me. So he knew she was just saying that to try to smooth things over. She then proceeded to tell me she broke up with Perry to date her first official boyfriend, the loser athlete I discussed previously. I said, that's it. You just broke up with Perry and never were intimate with him again. She said, yeah, that's basically everything. Now, he says, based on Perry's story and her body language, I knew she was not being truthful. So I set a trap. I asked her how many times were she and Perry intimate. She paused and said, I don't remember, but it was probably like 10 or 15 times. I then asked her if all the encounters occurred before she met her steroidal boyfriend, and she said yes. I then asked her, what about all the times you and Perry were together after you broke up with this jerk? She then said, oh yeah, we did reconnect briefly back then, but it only lasted a few months. See, what she's doing here is a trick called trickle truth, where she's only disclosing what she thinks he knows. And then once she finds out he knows more than what she thinks she knows, then she's going to give him a little more information. And she's only going to dribble out that information, to the level that she thinks he has in terms of knowledge. I asked her how many months did their reconciliation last, and she said it was something like 2 or 3, maybe 4. I then asked her how many times they were together during the reconciliation, and she said probably another 10 or 15 times. I said, why didn't you say this before? And she replied, I forgot all about that brief reconciliation until you reminded me of it. In my mind, I was screaming BS, but kept my cool and kept questioning her. I next asked Cathy, how many times were you intimate with Perry in the 2 years prior to our relationship? She said, she wasn't sure, maybe another 20 or so. I said, you keep changing your story. Now you're saying you've been with Perry on and off for nearly 8 years. She started crying and screamed at me saying, why are you dredging up stuff in my past that has nothing to do with us? I told her it has everything to do with us, as she's been lying to me. And then when I asked her for the truth, she continued to lie until I revealed details I have. That's that trickle truth. She asked, how did you find out about Perry? I told her that wasn't important. She said nothing and just bowed her head, crying, saying, why are you doing this? You're making me feel bad. See, she's trying to put it back on him and deflect it away from her because she knows she's been found out. At this point, I told her it was best for her to leave, as I needed to think things through. She then started to scream cry, saying she wasn't going anywhere and that I couldn't dump her like this. I told her I wasn't dumping her, but I needed some time to process everything. She continued profusely crying, but eventually got up and left. When the door shut and I was alone, I felt, he says like awful, but he meant awful, like my world had just imploded. I'm sitting here now writing this post, and I'm going to spend the rest of the night drinking expensive bourbon. Well, don't drink too much bourbon because that's not going to help your situation at all, Curt. He says, that's all I have to share for now, and your replies and feedback are welcome. So that was his second update, and now we're going to move to his final update. And the final update is from August 9th. It looks like about a month later, he came back and delivered a final update. He said, after pouring my heart out in previous posts, I thought I owed it to everyone to come back with an update. Folks, I broke up with Cathy a week after my last post. The day after my last post, I found out Cathy had been leaving messages and texting Perry asking him what he told me and cursing him out for ruining our relationship. Hearing this, along with the way Cathy responded when I confronted her, sealed the deal for me. Not to mention the terrible way she treated Perry. I'm still heartbroken as I thought she was the one, and sometimes I doubt my decision, thinking maybe I should have stayed with her. But then I quickly realize I can never trust or respect her again. He says, this will hopefully be my last post here. Thanks again to everyone. So that's his story. And first of all, I want to say he handled this situation very well, because as soon as he got the information about her past, he took time, he compiled his thoughts, and he confronted her, and he did not let her off the hook. So those are my thoughts on this. And I want to know your thoughts. How do you think he handled this situation? Did he do a good job, or would you have done something different in this case? Would you have stuck it out with her? Because he said she's been a wonderful girlfriend. He was going to pop the question to her. Would you have put the, past in the past and move forward with her? Or would you have done the same thing he did? What about this FWB relationship? The fact that she had been in an 8-year on and off FWB, friends with benefits relationship with this Perry. Would you get into a relationship with a woman like that? You know what my thoughts are from the beginning of this video. My answer is no. If you ever get into a relationship like that with a woman, the only kind of relationship you should get into with a woman like that would be another FWB relationship. You should not get into a committed relationship with her, and by all means, you should not marry her. So let me know your thoughts on that, and let me know your thoughts on friends with benefits relationships in general. So please hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Again, give us your comments, share this video with your friends and family, and please subscribe to this great channel, and I will catch you on the next one.